I am 17 years old, going on 18 in December, and I live with PTSD. And I want to tell you what that means. First, you have to know what PTSD is. It stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, but I think we should go deeper and to see why it's called that. If something is post-traumatic, it's after a traumatic event. That means that about a week or a few months after something traumatic happens to you, you can get symptoms that are accumulated over time because of stress. It becomes a disorder when it becomes debilitating and starts affecting your everyday living. Let me give you an example. A PTSD can be brought on by natural disasters, such as earthquakes, but it can also be brought on by things like car accidents or freak attacks. Someone who got into a car accident with PTSD might be fearful to drive for a few months, and that's a very mild case. But when it goes on for years and years, and it's really intrusive, and it is messing with your everyday life, that's when you have a very severe case. Like every disease, PTSD is on a spectrum, and it can be happening to you for many different reasons. I cannot speak about being in a car accident or a natural disaster, so I'm going to talk about what I actually know about, which is PTSD due to child abuse. I'm not going to tell you any statistics or anything like that, because I don't have them in front of my face right now. If you want to know the next video, let me know, but I'm just going to give you my point of view. I got diagnosed with PTSD when I was 11 years old, and at the time, my parents had divorced and I had found out that my mother was abusive to me. It was very disorienting, and I felt that something was wrong with me. I had triggers. The smallest things would send me back in time to when my mother used to terrorize me. I didn't like to be yelled at. I didn't like my name to be called in a certain way. I didn't like to be grabbed in a certain way. I couldn't sleep in a room that was too quiet because I thought my mother would come and attack me. I don't want to get too into the details about me and my parents, because I feel like I want to save those for later things. But the point is, I still struggle with it today. Its manifestations have just changed because I've gotten older. For instance, something I used to be really bad about was my anger. I couldn't control it because I didn't know where it was coming from. So anybody who got angry would set me off and make me scared, and then I would go and hold that in and go to school in the week and yell at somebody and explode on them. Nowadays, I don't have that problem. A problem I have now is more with my body and the fact that it's mine, and that's a whole nother story. You can think of PTSD sort of as like an after effect of something horrible. Trauma is when your brain is so overwhelmed with terror or fear that it shuts down, and it does all these mental gymnastics trying to keep you alive. The human brain is really good for those types of things. But when you have to undo it all, and when you have to get back to reality, or when you're trying to live your everyday life, it does not help you. Here are some ways that PTSD was keeping me alive before, but it's not now. An extreme startle response. The home that I used to live in was very unsafe. I had to be on my guard all the time, looking for a new threat, making sure I did everything perfectly right, and making sure that everybody was in an okay mood before I did anything. But nowadays, I don't have to do that. So I'll be walking down the street and a dog will start barking, and it will make me jump out of my skin. My heart will race. I feel like I'm watching a horror movie, but really it's just a dog, and I'm having an extreme reaction, and it feels like I always have to watch my back. Sometimes I'll be walking down the street and feeling like I need to look over my shoulder, but no one's following me anymore. Number 2 is vivid dreams. I have these. I used to not have vivid dreams. I used to have flashbacks, and flashbacks are when you travel back in time to a specific event due to a smell, a sound, a taste, a touch, a song, a voice. Anything can do it, and it can be something very small. A flashback is very vivid because it's an all-encompassing experience, and it is hard to figure out where you are in time. I've had flashbacks where I felt the size of a 5-year-old and been in the body of a 14-year-old and been very confused and disoriented and not remembered where I was or who the people were around me. It is like going back in time and watching all the worst parts of your life and not being able to stop it. You feel so helpless and powerless, like you can't do anything about it, even though now you're older, you can do something, but you just don't know how to do it. And it feels so real, and that's the hardest part. It is an internal thing, but it feels so real. The next is intrusive thoughts, oftentimes negative. I think we all know what intrusive means, but sometimes I'll just be sitting around having a really pleasant day, and I'll get this rush of sadness or anger. It'll take me back to the trauma. Sometimes I'll feel guilty because I felt like I wasn't a good enough daughter for my parents. Sometimes I will be angry at my parents for not giving me the childhood that I deserved, and sometimes I'll be sad about both, that I'll never be able to go back in time and fix anything. Having PTSD comes out in one other way for me, which does not happen to everybody. Because I've had PTSD for so long and I've lived in so many different stressful situations, I have PNES, which are psychogenic, non-epileptic seizures. They're not epileptic because they only happen if I don't get a good night's sleep or if I am emotionally stressed. As you can tell, though, PTSD does come with a lot of emotional stress, which can affect your sleep. So for the past 2 years, I've been having seizures on and off. But only recently did I find out that I did not have epilepsy, which is good because epilepsy is something you cannot really control, whereas PNES is in your hands, and so is PTSD, as long as you're willing to get the help, such as professional help with a therapist, and also prescription medications that can help regulate your feelings a little bit more. My seizures are, they happen in some different ways. When they first started occurring, I used to pass out and have an actual regular seizure, like the ones that you might have seen if you see anyone with epilepsy. Unconscious, choking on the tongue, foaming at the mouth. Alright, not choking on the tongue, that's a stereotype. Foaming at the mouth. I would wake up, be disoriented, not know who I was or where I was. But recently, my seizures have decreased in their severity. Last summer, I was able to stay awake during a seizure and experience it, which was scary, but also much better than I had been doing before that. And nowadays, the seizures only consist of a few spasms in my muscles, which still take a lot of energy out of me, but I don't fall down, I don't pass out, and I don't need to get stitches anymore, like the time I fell on my face and sliced open my chin with my jawbone. That was awful. There are some specific triggers that I have. If I'm in a crowded room, I love to know where the door is, and I like to sit next to the door. This is because I have anxiety, so if I feel like I need to run, I don't want to be far away from the exit. I'm always paranoid that I'll have to leave or that something is going to go wrong. I don't like to put my stuff down ever. I take my bags and my purse and my jacket everywhere with me because I'm too afraid that somebody is going to misplace it, and it makes me feel safer to have all my things with me in case I need to leave. If I've had a long day of events, like a very packed schedule, and a lot of information thrown at me, I become very nervous and agitated because I feel like I haven't had enough time to process everything. I am an overthinking individual, so everything needs a little bit of time to sink in for me, And when I don't get that time, I get very stressed out, like someone pressed fast forward on my life, and I'm trying to run to catch up. Sometimes when this happens, I dissociate. I get really stressed. Dissociation is when you detach from yourself. For me, I see it as myself floating in a bubble above my head, so I can see myself and I can see what's happening, but it's like watching a movie and not being able to press pause. I'm more like the viewer and not the character. Crowds make me feel lost. I think this is because I don't have a huge sense of self because of the way I grew up. So psychologically, I feel like I can't find myself. And emotionally and mentally, it's just too many people's energies coming together and too many voices trying to talk, especially if they're all loud people. My ears are sensitive because of my visual impairment, so loud noises really give me a headache. The pressure to talk sometimes causes me to get nervous as well. I used to have selective mutism from the ages of 6 to 8. So sometimes when I get super anxious and a seizure starts to happen where my muscles get really tense and the joints lock, I cannot talk. I have trouble and I get very anxious. When things like these happen, when I have triggers, I do have ways to handle them. Sometimes I have to leave the room because I cannot put words together, and so I'm not really able to communicate with anybody. So I have to leave or have someone take me away. I do have some warning signs if a seizure is going to happen. My muscles get sore because they are so tight and tense. My head feels heavy, fuzzy, or in pain. My throat gets a lump in it. And I'll just feel slightly off balance. I don't know how to explain it. It's not exactly dizziness, but I make sure that I'm in tune with my body enough to know if I feel off. I can usually tell if I wake up if I'm going to have one or if it's going to be a good day. So on to my coping mechanisms. I have phrases that I say to myself, like "you are safe" is a popular one, or "we have time," because sometimes I feel that there is not enough time for whatever it is that I need to do in the day. Sometimes I take walks to remove myself from the stressful environment. Doing a physical activity that engages all my senses is another way that I can cope. I have an exercise ball that I bounce on. I like to go rock climbing, ice skating, painting. I like to cut paper and shred it manually. And arts and crafts would really do that. I also like physical contact because it makes me feel less alone and isolated. As a blind person, I can't look around and see the people around me, but when they hold my hand or give me a hug, it makes me feel like I'm not alone with my feelings. When nobody is touching me, I feel less grounded and like these feelings are the only people who are going to come and be there for me, and really what they're doing is suffocating me. Sometimes I sit on the floor if I'm not with anybody, or I lay on the floor before I do my deep breathings. When I'm on the floor, I feel more solid because when I press down, the floor doesn't move or bend or shift like a mattress would. The floor is cold, so I feel better about it, and it makes me feel safe. I don't know if I'm going to continue this series, but I hope that you found this a little bit informative. I'm only intending to speak on my experiences, so please don't think that everybody with PTSD has PNES or that we have the same exact triggers. Honestly, speaking about this is very difficult, but I thought I'd start here with you guys because I'll have practice for when it really matters. Thank you for listening, and good night.